Usually when we talk about a community, whether it's a neighborhood association, a housing society, or like a local sports club, there is this expectation of a shared social contract.
Right.
You all agree to chip in for the maintenance, you follow the parking guidelines, and, in return, you get a harmonious place to live or gather. It's supposed to be cooperative.
It is. It relies heavily on a foundation of mutual trust and uniform standards.
Yeah.
The assumption is that the people elected to manage those shared resources view themselves as custodians.
Yeah, custodians.
Yeah.
But then you step into the world of internal governance disputes, and suddenly that foundation it completely evaporates.
Oh, absolutely.
We are looking at a landscape today where institutional power is just completely inverted. The tools meant to protect a community become, well, weapons. Weapons used to settle personal scores against the very members who fund the institution.
It is a textbook definition of fiduciary failure.
Hmm.
I mean, the documents we are analyzing today perfectly capture this exact phenomenon.
So, welcome to today's deep dive. We are working from two primary sources today. The first is a briefing document titled Civil Case Against a Member, which lays out the raw facts of a specific dispute.
Right, the ground reality.
Exactly. And the second is an analytical framework called the Lodestar Audit, confronting vendetta governance and fiduciary breach.
Which is a fantastic piece of analysis, by the way.
It really is.
Yeah.
Our objective for you today, the mission of this deep dive, is to decode exactly what happens when institutional authority is weaponized into a personal vendetta.
And, more importantly, how anyone in a democratic organization can spot the red flags before the Treasury is just drained.
Right, because the patterns identified in these documents, they are universal.
Yeah, they do not just apply to the specific society mentioned in the briefing. You see these exact same power dynamics on corporate boards, homeowner associations, faculty committees.
Charitable trusts, right.
Exactly. Anywhere a small group of people is entrusted with collective funds and collective authority, the risk of this vendetta governance is highly present.
Okay, let's unpack this. The central conflict here is fascinating because it seems so mundane on the surface, but it is incredibly insidious.
It really sneaks up on you.
It does. So we have a members association, a society with a managing committee. We'll just call them the MC for short.
Good call.
This society has a list of people who allegedly owe them money. Defaulters. Dozens of them, potentially. Yet the MC is proposing to spend the community's collective money to launch a lawsuit against exactly one person. Just one.
And the detail that turns this from a boring administrative task into a massive governance scandal is the identity of this specific target.
Right. Who is this guy?
That target, referred to in the text as Member X, is not a routine defaulter who simply forgot to pay their monthly maintenance fees.
No, not at all.
Member X is the only member who recently took the managing committee to a statutory regulator over disputed demands. And they actually secured a favorable regulatory order against the MC.
Wait, so a judge or competent authority looked at the situation, examined the MC's demands against Member X, and formally ruled that Member X was protected.
Yes, exactly. The MC lost.
Wow. So the MC turns around and decides that out of all the people who owe them money, they're going to use the community's treasury to sue the one guy who just publicly defeated them.
Which is just wild. The Lodestar Audit characterizes this as selective enforcement.
Selective enforcement.
Right, and it is the primary indicator of a governing body crossing the line from administration into retaliation.
I mean, it's so blatant.
It is. If the MC's true motivation was simply debt recovery, they would apply a uniform policy across the entire list of alleged defaulters. Choosing the one individual who successfully challenged their authority well, it demonstrates that the primary motive is not financial recovery for the society.
Right, it's institutional vindication for the committee. It feels akin to like a local amateur soccer league where half the players have minor uniform violations.
Oh, I like this analogy.
Yeah, like wrong colored socks, a logo that's a bit too large. The referee ignores it all season. But then one player points out that the referee completely blew a major offside call.
And the league commissioner agrees with the player, reversing the call.
Exactly. The very next game, that same referee suddenly decides to strictly enforce the minor uniform violation, threatening to banish a player from the league, but only that one specific player who successfully challenged him.
While the other players with the wrong socks are still running around the field.
Exactly. Nothing happens to them.
That analogy captures the psychological dynamic perfectly. The referee's action in your scenario communicates a very specific, chilling message to everyone else on the field.
Which is what?
It signals that the rules are no longer a framework for a fair game. They are a mechanism for punishing dissent.
It tells the rest of the players, if you question my authority, I will scour the rule book to find a way to destroy you.
Precisely. In a democratically governed society, the fundamental premise is that similar cases must be treated similarly.
Right.
Enforcement cannot fluctuate based on whether a member is compliant or inconvenient, and it certainly cannot be calibrated to punish a member for being successful before a regulator.
But it gets deeper than just a theoretical threat, right? The briefing document reveals that the MC didn't just propose this lawsuit in an open meeting. They took action in the shadows.
They did.
They secretly spent approximately 25,000 rupees of the society's common funds to issue a formal legal notice to Member X.
And that expenditure occurred without clear, unambiguous authority in the society's bylaws, and without obtaining prior approval from the general body of members.
They just went rogue.
They unilaterally decided to use the collective checkbook to initiate a legal conflict with their primary critic.
Now, I can hear someone defending this by saying, look, 25,000 rupees isn't millions of dollars. For a large society, that might just be a blip in the annual legal or administrative budget.
Sure, you hear that argument a lot.
Right. Like, are we overreacting to a minor procedural misstep?
Well, it is not about the quantum of the money. It is about the usurpation of authority.
Usurpation, that's a strong word.
But it fits. When an MC spends even 1 rupee of common funds to initiate unapproved, retaliatory litigation, they breach their fiduciary duty. The danger is that a legal notice is rarely the end of the spending.
It's just the beginning?
Exactly. It is the spark that ignites a much larger, uncontrollable fire. By issuing that notice secretly, the MC committed the society to a hostile posture without allowing the members to assess the risks.
And the risk assessment is completely skewed because of how the MC handles the information. The text highlights a severe non-disclosure issue here.
A huge one.
The MC is eventually forced to ask the members to approve further legal actions, but they conveniently omit the most critical piece of context.
Right, they ask the general body for permission to pursue Member X, but they do not disclose that the association has already suffered an adverse regulatory ruling regarding this exact dispute.
That is a critical failure of informed consent.
You cannot ask a body of members to authorize litigation without informing them that a competent authority has already found the society's position to be flawed.
It's like asking your family to invest in a business venture, but hiding the fact that the business just filed for bankruptcy last week.
Exactly.
You are asking them to underwrite a massive risk while actively blinding them to the odds of failure.
The author of the Lodestar Audit recognized how difficult it is for ordinary members to spot this kind of manipulation in real time. Committees rarely stand up and announce, "We are initiating a personal vendetta."
Right. They don't wear a villain mustache.
Exactly. They use the language of fiduciary duty. They claim they are fiercely protecting the Treasury. To cut through that rhetoric, the audit provides a comparative framework.
Let's get into that framework. It establishes a side-by-side comparison between neutral recovery and selective retaliation.
Right. So if we look at how those two approaches begin, the contrast is really stark. Neutral recovery starts with comprehensive data.
Meaning a complete list of all alleged defaulters.
Yes. A committee would generate that list, look at the total outstanding amounts, and formulate a strategy. Selective retaliation starts with a specific target.
They pick the person first.
The committee identifies the inconvenient member and then reverse engineers a justification to pursue them.
Which brings us to the criteria. In a system of neutral recovery, the criteria are written, objective, and uniform.
Like, perhaps the policy is that any member whose arrears exceed a certain amount for more than 90 days receives a notice. Everyone understands the threshold.
But in selective retaliation, the criteria are murky, shifting, or entirely undisclosed. The rules mysteriously bend to ensnare the target, while allowing favored members to slip through.
Which brings us back to disclosure. Neutral recovery requires placing the complete, unvarnished facts before the members, the good, the bad, and the adverse regulatory orders.
Retaliation requires narrative control. The committee must suppress the adverse facts, hide the initial secret expenditures, and present a curated version of reality to manufacture consent.
The ultimate divergence between these two approaches lies in their impact on the community's psychology. Neutral recovery builds institutional confidence.
Even if people don't like it.
Right. Members might not enjoy paying dues, but if they see a fair, predictable system, they respect it. Selective retaliation, conversely, breeds fear and division.
So what does this all mean for the ordinary members just watching from the sidelines? Because the Lodestar Audit talks about the chilling effect on dissent.
It does.
If you are an ordinary member, someone who just wants to use the amenities and live in peace, watching the MC use 25,000 rupees of collective funds to go after member X sends a terrifying message.
The message is unambiguous. If you challenge the managing committee and win, your own maintenance fees will be used to fund a lawsuit against you. That destroys the concept of member equality.
I would be terrified to raise my hand at the next annual general meeting.
Most people would be.
Right. If I notice a discrepancy in the landscaping budget, or if I think the secretary overstepping their bounds, I'm going to keep my mouth shut.
Because you look at member X.
Exactly. I'd look at member X, who is now forced to spend his own personal savings to defend himself against a Goliath funded by the very community he belongs to, and I would decide that oversight simply isn't worth the personal ruin.
That is precisely how democratic governance decays into autocracy. A healthy society requires members who are free to question accounts, challenge demands, and approach statutory regulators when they believe the law is being violated.
And the Lodestar Audit emphasizes that these rights are entirely meaningless if exercising them guarantees institutional retaliation.
It creates an inherently asymmetrical conflict. The committee fights with an endless pool of other people's money, while the dissenting member fights with their own finite resources.
So if an MC is entrenched, and they are hiding behind this false flag of protecting the Treasury, how do the members scientifically prove that the committee's actions are actually vendetta governance?
Because the MC will have an excuse for everything.
Exactly. They will claim member X's case is just the most visible, or that they are starting with him to set an example.
That is the specific purpose of the Lodestar v4.0 stress test, outlined in the second document. It is a diagnostic tool designed to bypass procedural theater and public relations spin.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
It does not evaluate the committee's rhetoric. It evaluates facts, power flows, disclosure patterns, and institutional harm. It utilizes a series of analytical thought experiments to determine whether a decision is genuinely aligned with the society's interest.
Let's walk through these tests. The first of these thought experiments is the new recruit test.
Yes.
If I brought a neighbor who just moved into the community yesterday to a town hall meeting someone with absolutely zero history, no bias, no knowledge of the past 5 years of petty grievances, and presented them with the raw facts, what would they conclude?
A neutral observer would immediately recognize the absurdity of the situation. They would see a list of 20 defaulters, yet the society is exclusively suing the single individual who recently defeated the committee in court.
It's glaringly obvious to an outsider.
The new recruit test strips away the historical baggage the committees often use to justify irrational decisions. If it doesn't make sense to a neutral third party, it is likely driven by hidden motives.
Okay, the next one is the leaked memo test. This touches on the concept of discoverability and true intent, right?
It asks the evaluator to imagine that the unvarnished, true motive behind the decision was explicitly written down in an internal memo, and that memo was subsequently leaked to the entire membership.
Oh, wow.
If the true motive to make an example of member X and avenge a regulatory defeat were made public, would the decision survive scrutiny?
The membership would revolt. If an MC have to aggressively hide their primary reason for taking an action, that action is fundamentally illegitimate.
Exactly.
It also fails the next one, the hypocrisy test.
The hypocrisy test cuts to the constitutional core of any governed body. A society that claims to operate under democratic rules and the rule of law cannot logically punish a member for utilizing lawful regulatory remedies.
It is an inherent contradiction.
You cannot demand that members respect the society's authority while simultaneously weaponizing society funds against a member who successfully invoked a higher legal authority to protect themselves.
It's punishing someone for playing by the rules and winning. It's like sore loser syndrome elevated to institutional policy.
That's a great way to put it.
And that ties directly into the golden rule test, which is essentially do unto others.
Right. If the roles were reversed, if the managing committee members found themselves as ordinary citizens dealing with a municipal authority and they obtained a favorable ruling from a higher court against that authority,
They would be thrilled.
and they would be outraged if the municipality suddenly singled them out for retaliatory action while ignoring identical cases. They would scream that their civil rights were being violated, yet they are perfectly willing to inflict that exact scenario on member X.
But wait, let me play devil's advocate here. Let me challenge this framework. The committee's defense lawyers would argue that the MC isn't acting out of spite.
How so?
They would claim that because member X is high profile, securing a victory against him sends the strongest possible deterrent message to the remaining defaulters. They might argue that prioritizing this specific case, while temporarily unequal, serves the ultimate fiduciary goal of maximizing revenue. Does the Lodestar Audit account for that utilitarian defense?
It dismantled that defense entirely through the beneficiary test and the Steelman test.
Okay, break those down for us.
The beneficiary test requires us to isolate who actually profits from the proposed action and who bears the risk. The committee claims the society benefits from the deterrent effect. But when you map the power flows, the society bears 100% of the financial risk, the upfront legal costs, the potential for countersuits, and the internal community division.
Wow, okay, so who actually benefits?
The only entity that clearly and immediately benefits is the managing committee itself, which gets to protect its institutional pride and avoid acknowledging a regulatory defeat.
So the society absorbs all the liability while the committee reaps the ego gratification. That is a terrible trade-off for the members.
Exactly. And to address their claim of strategic prioritization, we apply the Steelman test.
What's the Steelman test?
In debate theory, a straw man argument is when you deliberately misrepresent your opponent's position to make it easier to attack. A Steelman argument is the exact opposite. It requires a decision maker to articulate the absolute strongest, most compelling argument against their own proposal and then address it honestly and logically.
So if the MC was acting in good faith, they would have to stand up in front of the general body and say, the most significant argument against suing member X right now is that out of all our defaulters, he is the only one who recently beat us in front of a regulator.
Right. They would have to say, we acknowledge that singling him out looked highly retaliatory and legally risky. However, here is our objective, data-driven reason for proceeding anyway.
But they do not do that. They do not acknowledge the regulatory order. They actively suppress it.
If a governance proposal cannot survive the acknowledgement of the strongest facts against it, the proposal is intellectually dishonest. The committee's refusal to steelman the situation proves that their utilitarian defense is just a smokescreen for a vendetta.
The tests prove the decision is flawed. The Lodestar Audit conclusively demonstrates that the decision to target member X is fundamentally flawed, but a flawed decision doesn't automatically materialize into a lawsuit.
No, it requires action.
Right. There is a mechanical process to institutional action. The briefing document outlines how the MC actually executed this, and they did it by completely inverting the proper sequence of governance.
This is a crucial point for anyone studying organizational behavior. Fiduciary failure is rarely just about making a bad choice. It is almost always characterized by procedural subversion.
The how matters as much as the what.
Governance is deeply concerned with how and when decisions are made, not just what the decisions are. The Lodestar Audit maps out the gold standard for this kind of institutional action.
The proper logical sequence should be a 5-step progression, according to the text. First is disclosure. The committee must put all the facts, including adverse rulings, on the table.
Second is legal authority. They must verify that the society's bylaws explicitly permit the proposed action.
Third is independent advice. They should obtain counsel from a neutral legal professional who is not financially incentivized to encourage endless litigation.
Fourth is member approval. The general body, fully informed, votes on the proposal.
And only then, the 5th step is expenditure. The money is spent.
That sequence ensures that consent precedes action. It guarantees that the people whose money is being risked have the opportunity to evaluate the gamble before the dice are rolled. Now, contrast that with the timeline executed by the managing committee in this case.
They inverted the sequence entirely.
Completely inverted it.
They started with a secret decision. Behind closed doors, they decided to target member X. They immediately moved to issuing a legal notice. To do that, they engaged in common fund spending, secretly authorizing that 25,000 rupees.
Which immediately drove the escalation of the dispute, turning a disagreement into a formal legal battle.
And only after all of that was done did they seek ex post facto approval from the members.
What's fascinating here is the psychology of seeking ex post facto approval. Asking for permission after the fact is highly manipulative.
It's like asking for forgiveness instead of permission, but with other people's money.
When an MC presents an action that has already occurred, complete with sunk costs and escalated tensions, they are not asking for democratic consent. They're demanding a rubber stamp for a fait accompli.
It creates a hostage situation for the voters.
It does.
If I am sitting in that meeting and the committee says, we've already spent 25,000 rupees of your money and we are already locked in a legal battle with member X, please vote to authorize this, my choices are terrible.
Right, because if you vote no,
Do we just forfeit the 25,000 rupees? Does the society suddenly look weak and disorganized? The committee forces the members to either endorse a vendetta or accept an immediate, unrecoverable financial loss.
the Lodestar Audit is unequivocal on this point. You cannot cure prior non-disclosure and unauthorized expenditure with a belated vote. A resolution passed after a period of concealment does not constitute informed consent.
It is merely the committee attempting to launder their fiduciary breach through a compromised democratic process.
And the real-world consequences of that secret escalation are severe because the target rarely just sits there and takes it.
The real-world fallout here is crazy. The briefing document details how this specific dispute escalated wildly. Because the MC sent this secret, aggressive legal notice, member X took defensive action.
They didn't just reply with a letter, they approached a consumer forum in
Chandigarh. This perfectly illustrates the cascading risk of vendetta governance. By attempting to secretly pressure member X, the committee inadvertently exposed the entire society to complex, outstation legal proceedings.
The dispute has geographically and financially metastasized.
The logistics of that are a nightmare. The society isn't just dealing with a local municipal spat anymore. They now have to retain legal counsel in Chandigarh.
They have to fund travel for committee members or representatives to attend hearings.
They are paying coordination fees, drafting fees for outstation responses, and all the attendant bureaucratic costs. A dispute that might have been settled locally with a conversation has turned into an interstate legal war.
And we must ask, what exactly is the society paying to defend in Chandigarh? They are no longer simply prosecuting a routine dues claim.
No, not at all.
They're using the members' common funds to defend the managing committee's own secretive and flawed governance. The society's lawyers will have to explain to a distant judge why the committee hid a prior regulatory order, why they selectively targeted one member out of 20, and why they spent funds without authorization.
The community is being drained to defend the committee's bad behavior. That is infuriating.
It's a massive waste of resources.
If an MC has driven the society into this kind of ditch, how does an ordinary member force them to hit the brakes? The documents introduce a mechanism called the accountability trap. How does that function logically?
The accountability trap is a strategic legal snare designed to prevent the committee from securing that manipulative ex post facto approval. It forces the MC to answer hard, objective questions on the official record before any vote can be taken.
The document outlines 10 specific questions, right?
Yes. 10 questions that strip away the rhetoric of fiduciary duty and expose the underlying mechanics of the decision.
I want to analyze a few of these questions because the phrasing is incredibly precise. One question is, how many alleged defaulters exist in total, and why was member X selected first or specially?
That question directly attacks the selective enforcement issue. It forces the committee to admit the existence of other defaulters on the record. If they cannot provide a mathematically sound, policy-driven reason for selecting member X, they effectively confess to vendetta governance.
Another critical question from the trap: did member X obtain a regulatory order in his favor, and why was that order not fully disclosed to members before spending money?
This traps the committee in their own suppression of information. They must either admit they hid a material fact from the people whose money they are spending, or they must lie on the record about a publicly verifiable regulatory order.
Which exposes them to further legal jeopardy.
Exactly.
Then there is the question regarding independent legal advice. Was independent legal advice obtained after the regulatory order, and was it circulated to members?
It forces them to prove they didn't just hire a yes man to draft a hostile letter.
But the final question, the 10th one, is the absolute hammer.
The final question asks, who will personally take responsibility if the litigation fails?
Imagine the dead silence in a community hall when that question is formally raised.
You could hear a pin drop.
The committee members who were previously so eager to act tough using the society's checkbook are suddenly forced to consider their own personal liability. No one volunteering on a board wants to put their own house or savings on the line for a petty neighborhood feud.
That is the power of the accountability trap. The author stipulates that if the committee refuses or fails to answer these 10 questions plainly, the proposed litigation is democratically indefensible.
The trap doesn't rely on persuading the committee to change their minds. It relies on making their current path legally and politically impassable.
Exactly, it boxes them in.
This brings up a massive philosophical question. This entire dynamic forces a massive realization. If the managing committee is misusing the community's funds, suppressing vital information, bypassing the bylaws, and dragging the society into expensive outstation litigation just to salvage their own pride, who is actually the good guy here?
Who was defending the institution?
Right. Who is actually looking out for the society?
The Lodestar Audit addresses this directly, identifying what it calls the governance inversion.
The governance inversion. Let's flip the script.
Committees engaged in vendettas dedicate massive resources to painting the dissenting member as the enemy of the society. They frame Member X as a disruptive force, a rogue element who must be crushed to maintain institutional order. But an objective analysis of the facts reveals the exact opposite to be true.
To understand that, we have to define what the institution actually is. What is the central purpose of a member society? It is not to protect the prestige of the president. It is not to ensure the secretary never loses an argument.
The central overriding purpose of the society is to protect the rights of its members, to safeguard the common funds, and to ensure transparent, lawful, and democratic governance.
So when Member X believed a financial demand was unlawful, and he approached a competent statutory forum to test that demand, he was not attacking the society.
Absolutely not. He was invoking lawful oversight. He was asking an independent authority to ensure that the committee was playing by the rules established to govern the society.
That action is not anti-society. It is the ultimate defense of the society's constitutional order against rogue office bearers.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we tend to view dissent as inherently destructive. But in this context, dissent is the immune system of the democratic organization.
That is a highly accurate biological metaphor, the immune system.
The managing committee is not the owner of the society. They are temporary trustees. When the immune system detects an anomaly, when objecting members question the accounts, demand disclosure, or challenge a suspicious legal strategy, they are performing a vital, life-saving function for the body politic.
They are actively working to preserve the society's central purpose. This completely flips the traditional narrative.
It does.
The people asking the annoying, persistent questions at the annual meetings are not the troublemakers. They're the watchdogs trying to prevent the temporary drivers from crashing the institutional vehicle.
This leads to a harsh, inescapable conclusion articulated in the Lodestar text. If the dissenting members are the ones acting to protect the society's true purpose, who is acting against it?
Who are the true adversaries of the society?
The only actors actively subverting the society's purpose are the president, the secretary, and those committee members who authorize the secretive, retaliatory action.
Wow.
They are the ones who ignored a regulatory order. They are the ones who spent money without consent. They are the ones who exposed the community to massive legal risk. They are the true adversaries of the society's welfare.
It is a total paradigm shift. Supporting the managing committee does not automatically equate to supporting the society. In fact, in a case of vendetta governance, blindly supporting the committee is the fastest way to destroy the society.
The general body must recognize that their ultimate loyalty is owed to the society's charter and purpose, not to the individuals who currently happen to hold office.
So, knowing that the MC has acted against the society's purpose and spent 25,000 rupees to do it, how can you, the listener, or any ordinary member, fix this broken system and reclaim the organization? The Lodestar Audit doesn't just diagnose the disease, it prescribes a very specific course of treatment.
The roadmap for recovery begins with establishing a minimum fair process. Before a single additional rupee of common funds is spent on the dispute, the general body must activate the emergency brakes and demand immediate, non-negotiable corrective actions.
What does that emergency brake entail mechanically?
It demands radical transparency. The committee must produce the comprehensive list of all alleged defaulters and their outstanding amounts.
They must immediately circulate the full, unredacted text of the regulatory order that they previously suppressed.
Yes, and they must provide a detailed formal explanation of exactly who authorized the initial 25,000 rupee expenditure, citing the specific bylaw provision they claim granted them that power.
And crucially, they must provide a clear statement regarding who will be personally accountable if the outstation litigation in Chandigarh ultimately fails.
Without those minimum safeguards, any vote taken by the members is just a rubber stamp for a corrupt process.
But what about the money that has already vanished? The 25,000 rupees spent on the secret legal notice. The briefing document introduces a concept that I think is the most striking remedy in this entire analysis: the personal recovery of funds.
The foundational argument is that common funds cannot be used as an institutional shield for personal vindictiveness. If money was expended to protect the committee's pride or to retaliate against a successful critic, that is fundamentally not a legitimate society expense.
Therefore, the society as a whole should not bear the cost. Let me build an analogy for this because it clarifies the absurdity of the committee's position.
Go for it.
Imagine you lend me your car for the weekend so I can drive to the hardware store to pick up supplies for a community project. That is the agreed-upon common purpose.
Okay, I'm with you.
But once I have the keys, I decide to go completely off the planned route. I drive across town, locate the house of someone I have a bitter personal grudge against, and I intentionally ram your car into their mailbox.
A vivid demonstration of unauthorized use.
I bring the car back to you, the front end is completely smashed, and I hand you the repair bill. I look you in the eye and say, hey, we need to pay this repair bill out of our joint account because technically I was driving your car when it happened.
You would look at me like I was insane.
You would say, absolutely not. I am not paying the insurance deductible for your personal vendetta. You took the vehicle off mission. You are paying for this repair out of your own personal pocket.
The legal and fiduciary principles are identical here. The managing committee took the society's vehicle, its common funds, its letterhead, its institutional authority, and crashed it into member X out of personal spite without seeking permission for the detour.
The repair bill, the 25,000 rupees already spent, and any future costs incurred in Chandigarh must be paid personally by the office bearers who authorized the joyride. I want to push back on this concept of personal liability, though. Is this just about punishing bad actors? Because if we implement a system where volunteer board members are personally terrified that a mistaken vote could wipe out their personal savings, aren't we going to scare away all the good, honest people from serving?
That's a fair concern.
Won't our communities be left completely leaderless?
That is the classic argument against personal liability. But the Lodestar Audit addresses it through the lens of moral hazard. Personal recovery isn't vengeance, it's governance discipline.
Explain that distinction.
There is a massive difference between a board making a good faith business mistake, like hiring a contractor who does a poor job, and a board intentionally spending common funds secretly to punish a critic.
So the liability attaches to the nature of the act, the secrecy and retaliation, not just the financial outcome.
Precisely. If committee members know they can secretly weaponize common funds to punish their enemies, and the worst that happens is the society pays the bill, the abuse will never cease. They get to play autocrat with zero personal downside.
Personal liability aligns authority with responsibility.
If future office bearers know that unauthorized, vindictive expenditures will be legally extracted from their personal bank accounts, their behavior changes instantly. The threat of personal liability is the ultimate, necessary deterrent against fiduciary abuse.
It forces them to check the bylaws, seek independent advice, and secure member consent before they act.
It forces them to have skin in the game. If you are so convinced that suing a member is vital for the society's survival, you should be willing to underwrite that belief with your own wallet.
The briefing document actually provides a mechanism to enforce this, suggesting a specific general body resolution.
The proposed resolution is a masterclass in restorative governance. It structurally dismantles the committee's overreach.
What's in it?
It explicitly records the absolute right of any member to approach a statutory regulator without fear of institutional retaliation. It mandates the full disclosure of all facts surrounding the initial unauthorized spend.
And it strictly prohibits any further disbursement of common funds for this specific dispute without independent, neutral legal advice and a comprehensive risk analysis.
And it includes the mechanism for recovery. It mandates that if an investigation finds the expenditure was incurred without bylaw authority or prior approval, the general body directs the immediate personal recovery of those funds from the responsible individuals.
It codifies accountability directly into the society's immediate operating procedures.
It effectively removes the weapons from the committee's hands and restores ultimate authority to the general body, where it constitutionally belongs.
This has been an incredible deconstruction of power dynamics. We started with what looked like a mundane debt recovery issue, but by applying the Lodestar Audit, we exposed the mechanics of vendetta governance.
We saw how committees use selective enforcement and secret expenditures to mask their personal vendettas.
We learned how suppressing regulatory orders destroys informed consent, and how ex post facto voting is often just a hostage situation designed to launder fiduciary failure.
We also uncovered the governance inversion, the realization that the dissenting members are often the true defenders of an institution's purpose, while the rogue leaders are its primary threat.
And we concluded that the ultimate remedy lies in enforcing minimum fair process and absolute personal financial liability for unauthorized retaliatory actions.
These principles apply to you directly. Whether you sit on a corporate board, an HOA board, a faculty senate, or just a member of a local club, the red flags of vendetta governance are exactly the same.
The next time a leader asks you to hurriedly approve a decision after the money has already been spent, and they seem unusually focused on punishing one specific critic, you now have the analytical tools to stop the process in its tracks.
You have the vocabulary to identify the fiduciary breach and the strategic framework to demand accountability.
I want to leave you with one final thought to explore on your own. The text strongly argues that office bearers must face personal financial liability when they misuse common funds for a vendetta. It argues that without the fear of personal loss, leaders will inevitably abuse communal funds.
But ponder the delicate balance of that reality.
If we completely strip away institutional immunity, will good, honest people be too terrified to volunteer for leadership roles? Or is the threat of personal liability the only way to guarantee that power is exercised with true fiduciary care?
Does authority inevitably corrupt human judgment? Unless it is constrained by immediate, terrifying personal consequence.
Or is it possible to build a community culture so deeply rooted in genuine fiduciary care that the trap of personal liability never needs to be sprung? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Take that delicate balance of power and accountability with you and examine the power dynamics in your own communities. We will see you next time.